I'd like to introduce my friend, Mr. Larry Shade. And Larry, I'm just going to let you take it away. There will be a time, I believe, for questions after the main part of the presentation, and he will go ahead and let you know that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat box. And we're just going to go ahead and go from there. So Larry, take it away.
Thank you, Vince. I appreciate that, my friend, and that open invitation for you to come out and let me show you how to make a gig. It's a standing invite, so please take advantage of that. Okay.
What on, for sure.
Let me start with this, and I will say Osija Nagat, que Dawodoan Kano Halega. Okay. Janela Ulaneheti Kadohan. And basically, and I'm not real fluent, but some of the speakers out there, my name is Larry Shade. My given Cherokee name is Ganohalega, which means hunter. My grandfather named me that, and that's kind of what I do. I mean, the name fits me. I spend a lot of time out in the woods, especially, not so much in the summertime because of the little critters out there, not so much the skunks and all that, but the ticks and chiggers. But I do spend a lot of time out in the woods in the fall and winter. I hunt and fish, and we giggle a lot at night during the winter time, and when we get crawdads during the summertime. We deal with a few snakes. But I am from Janela. That's where I am from. I am from the Lost City community, and I was born to my blood parents are Loretta and Hasty Shade, two very very fluent Cherokee speakers. They were what you would call a master level linguist in the Cherokee language. They knew the language, they spoke the language, read and write and interpret. And I lost my mom, a few months ago back in March, and Dad's been gone now, going on about 11 years now. So, but their presence, will always be with me. Some of the things that we talked about, some of the things that I grew up with them, and it was always a learning lesson for us when we went somewhere with him. He never did say, "Come on, I need to show you this. You need to learn this." Anytime that we were somewhere, and he would say, "This is a teaching," and when he said this is a teaching, you knew you better listen, because that was a moment that there wasn't going to be very many of those moments, but you knew you had to pay and be attentive. So, but anyway, my name is Larry Shade, and I am from the Lost City community, and I live just off of 14 Mile Creek here in Cherokee County. This is God's country for us. I've lived here my whole life. Later on, I'll present a short PowerPoint and the process of what I do, and it's not like, I could have done a live demonstration, but it's been raining a little bit here, and the Wi-Fi signal is not really good. But if I can do it this way, hopefully you get a little bit out of it. And then, like Vincent said at the end of it, there'll be a time for question and answer, and I'll try to get to all of the questions that I can as they come in. But no, my forte is gig making. Okay, I learned it from my father and his, my doo-doo. So basically, I am a third generation gig maker. And as I have learned the skill, I have a lot of people that come in and say, "Larry, can you teach me how to make a gig?" And one of the things I tell them is that the teaching part is there. I said, I'll tell them I can show you. But, as my dad would tell me, he'd say, "Bud," he said, "if somebody wanted to really get after this and learn how, it's going to take them about 5 years to make a really good product." And I can get out there and, just as he did, once I hammer and I start, I know the processes, I know the techniques. It's just like second nature to me as I do this. And I make it look easy. He made it look easy when I started, but when I got out there and I started hammering, I had the awfulest looking product that, being humble as he is, he would say, "That looks okay. That looks good." But I knew in the back of my mind that, because I always compared it to what he did. So, but no, I have been married to Shelley for many years now, and I have 4 kids. Chad, Heather, Dustin, and Katie. And I have 7 new grandkids. I have 3 older ones that are 16 and 14 and 13, Chad, Jake, and Kobe. But when I'm, those guys, I mean, I'm really proud of them, but also my 2 boys, you always want to have grandkids to carry on, the legacy, even your last name, and even girls, but I have, there's 2 twins in our family. They're about a little over 3.5 months old now, and they're getting bigger and progressing. And I have, that is Noah and Nora. They belong to Chad, my oldest son. And my youngest son, Dustin, Thea, she just turned 2 years old at the beginning of August. And then Braylon, he'll be almost 5 months now. But anyway, my family's growing. And then Mom, when she was alive, she knew that the 2 babies were coming, the 3 babies were coming. But we were hoping that she could have, made it this far. She knew, because, she kept saying, she'd always said, but you just make sure that those babies are being taken care of. And I said, I will, Mom. I will. You taught us. We got to learn by how you taught us, and we're just going to pass that on to them. So, but anyway, that's a little bit about who I am. I am, as far as my bloodline, blood quantum, I am between 3/4 and full blood. My dad was full blood, and my mom was just not quite full blood. But I am a Cherokee descent. I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation, and I'm so proud of our tribe and what we do, how we help each other. We just have many programs that are going on, and our administration changes, and each time our administration changes, we always hope for the good things that the people are going to get out of and what's offered to them. And everything's been good so far. And no, I can't complain, because I get to see the people around me. And my dad was a former deputy chief, and that was his philosophy, was that getting the people in there to get them help. And that's kind of what I do. But culturally, I teach culture. I know the stories. I don't know all the stories, but my forte is gig making. I know how to make bows. I know how to make blowguns, marbles. And that's just something that, watching my father was, that, we learned to do that. And it was something that he indulged in, and I have great admiration for him. So, but yeah, as we get into this at the end of our session here, I'll answer some questions, and I'll see if I can get them all answered, and we'll go from here and see. I've done a few Zoom presentations. Our school year, I teach. I am a DDO Hoss. I am a teacher. So I've done PE through Zoom. I've had to exercise with the kids. I haven't exercised in a long time, but just being out there and exercising with a group of kids, when they see you do it, then they know that, hey, this old man, he has a little effort behind it. So I try to instill that in my kids. But I teach a lot of culture. I work with different programs at Cherokee Nation through the summer and throughout the year, in different presentations. But 2 of the things that I really enjoy, and I'm honored that I get to do those things, is I get to work at Camp Cherokee. We hold summer camps, cultural camps, and educational camps throughout the 14 counties. We're different in different communities: the Stillwell community, Little Kansas, Nowata, Warner, Tahlequah, Bartlesville, Claremore, those areas. We have cultural camps, and I get to do presentations of different cultural components to those little guys, and they really enjoy it, and I enjoy it. I enjoy seeing them learn and teaching them things that that nobody in their life may not be. They know a little bit about, but they might not know a whole lot about it. But I just, I share what I know, and it's kind of like my dad did. He shared a lot of his knowledge. And the other thing that I really enjoy, and that I enjoy working with career services, and I get to go on a trip to North Carolina to our home, what we call our old homeland, with a leadership intern group. We hire about anywhere from 10 to 15 students. We show them the inner workings of Cherokee Nation. They go out and they meet the different directors of different programs, different components throughout the 14 counties. And then along that way, we teach them soft skills, interview skills. We show them cultural components, And the highlight of their trip was we take them to North Carolina. And if you've ever been to North Carolina, my suggestion is don't go as a tourist. Find these people there in the communities who can take you and tell you the stories, the events that happen, why these places are significant, because there are a lot of places out there that very few people know about, like Juco Rock, and even Clingman's Dome has a story itself. And that's where our Cherokees, our ancient Cherokees, we got our laws, our name when we didn't know who we are, and we also that's where we were given fire. So, and those things are real important to us. And I get to take the students and we go there and we do the whole 9 yards. We're gone about 8 days. So I spend 8 days away from my family, but in that process, I make new friends, and basically, we're a little traveling family when we get on a bus, and it's fun. But no, I am a third generation gig maker, and the gig style that I make is after the two gentlemen that they were pretty well known in this area, Hastings Shade and Totem Hair being just a few miles from Salina. Growing up, Dad would haul us every Saturday morning. Me and my brother, we'd want to watch Saturday morning cartoons. And then Dad would haul us to Totem Hairs, and him and Totem would get together. And there was two stumps just outside the shop there. And that's where me and my brother sat while, we would watch them. And along their process of learning how to make gigs, there was a lot of stories, a lot of language that was spoken, a lot of old language. And watching those two collaborate and work on a specific design or a technique and they collaborated together, and they were just like, as watching kids grow up, when two kids get together and they start playing with each other, that was something that that's pretty special to me. And I know Totem Hair's family is, he was a special person, as all cultural people who present themselves and teach what they know. Because a lot of these stories, when these people go away, they take those things with them. But no, let me get into my PowerPoint and get into a little bit of what I do. Okay, let me find Vince, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Let me see how click on the share component. Where am I? I don't see my PowerPoint, Vince.
Go ahead and click on down at the bottom.
I just did. I clicked on share, and I'm gonna stop share and go back. Okay.
Okay, go ahead and open up your PowerPoint down at the bottom.
Let me see it. Okay, my PowerPoint is open.
Okay, you should be able to share it now.
Okay, so now all right. So here we go. All right, Vince. Thank you, Vince.
Bet.
All right. Little PowerPoint that I have is cultural gig making. That is my name, Larry Shade. We call it a traditional art of making fish gigs and crawdad gigs, but the traditional component really comes before European contact. When the Europeans came in and we got to see how they were making their tools, repairing things, and making their tools for their everyday way of life, we took those techniques of learning how to use the forge. We didn't have access to coal, but we learned those techniques and we applied them to making things that were useful to us. Learning how to make metal, shaping metal, we use them for making gigs, things like that. Tomahawks, weapons. But before that component, we made our gigs out of just basically our natural resources. We would split wood, we would shape it, round it, and put points on the end of it, or we also use river cane. But as far as the traditional art of making fish gigs and crawdad gigs, I've studied back and I've looked at how those things, what they look like before European contact, and it's pretty neat, pretty fascinating. But before we do anything, we have to understand that in our culture, our animals taught us how to do a lot of things. And every animal has a talent. And as we watch those animals and their way of life, we applied those things that those animals were doing into our way of life and how to make things, how to use things like that. You know, one of the stories too, and I'll go off track here, is the story of Delilah, and that's the woodpecker, which is very similar to the kingfisher bird. And then the story tells us that a hunter was traveling in the woods one day, and the day itself was windy, and as he walked by an area, he heard this beautiful sound coming from this tree. And the more he listened, the more of the different sounds, the tones and pitches, and he started looking for some kind of animal that was making that noise. But he couldn't find that animal, but he did find a tree, and he knew where that sound source was coming from, and it was coming from the top of the tree. So he put down all of his stuff, and he started to climb that tree. And as the closer he got to the top of the tree, the louder the sound got. But he still saw nothing that was making that sound. So he finally pinpointed the source, and he saw that it was out on a certain limb that looked like it had died, and there was no leaves or anything green about it. And it was just an old section of that limb. And as he climbed to it, he got to it. He was able to look at the top of it, and he saw that there were small holes in the top of it. And he wondered what had made those holes. So rather than doing anything, he climbed back down, and he sat, and he waited, and he waited, and he waited. And eventually a woodpecker showed up, and it landed on that limb, and he started to dig in the wood for insects and grubs. So then he knew that that's what made the sound. So he went up and he collected that limb, and he took it home, and he took it to his village, and he showed the people that they could make sound. And that is the origin of where our flute comes from. But that's just one of the stories from animals. And the story of what I do comes from the kingfisher bird. And it says, as legend has it, the kingfisher bird was meant to be a water bird, but as he had not been given either web feet or a means to make a living, so the animals held council and decided to make him a bill like a long, sharp awl. So they made the bill, and they fastened it to the front of his mouth. And he flew to the top of the tree, and he sailed out, and he darted down into the water. And he came up with a fish on, and what we call in Cherokee, degatis. We call it a gig. And to this day, he has been the best gigger of all the animals. It's kind of where we got the idea. So gigging, degatia, is the practice of hunting fish and small game with a similar multi-pronged spear. Gigging was common among the Cherokees. Usually a 3-pronged spear was utilized to gig or stick large fish, while a 2-pronged spear was used for smaller fish. We call those 2-pronged spear gigs wader gigs, because we actually get out in the water and about waist deep, and we gig from there. And later on in the presentation, I'll show you a picture of my father gigging on 14 Mile Creek to show you how that was done. And the wood that we used was made from Osage orange, a black locust or black walnut. And then the long time ago, they were tipped with a sharpened bone, stone, copper, were the points. And these were the weapons that were carried by those Cherokee fishermen of long ago. In the old days, the gigs were made from river cane or small, long, straight wood poles. But river cane was most used because if the fish would miss, the river cane has little air pockets in it, and then that would make the gig float and make it easy to retrieve. And again, the points were made from antlers or skeleton bones. They were sanded to sharp points and fastened to the end of the gig. Now, here's a little story. My dad was having to do a project for a museum one time, and they wanted an older gig made out of bone. And he said, "Bud, I don't have any glue." He said, "But there was a glue that we made a long time ago." And he said, "I need you to go get some material." So he sent me to go get some pine sap. So instead of going and getting pine sap, I went to a gentleman that just lived down the road from us. He had a bunch of cedar trees in his yard. So I went and collected just a little bit. And I told him, when I come back home, I said, "Dad," I said, there wasn't very much sap in those trees." He said, "Where'd you go?" And I said, "I went to our old swimming hole down there by White Killers." And he said, "No, Bub." He said, "You got to go to Western Hills Lodge." He said, those those are the pine trees there that your dodo planted back in the 1930s, and you'll get some sap there. So I got quite a bit of pine sap, and I brought it home, and he had a little fire built and had a little clay bowl there, and I put that pine sap in it, and it started to heat it, and it started to soften it up. And he said, all right, just from the fire, he put some sticks in there, and that as that wood started to char, we crumbled that charred wood inside of that pitch. And the next thing he said was, he said, I need a binder, something to put in this to hold it together. I said, what is it? He said, yeah. He said, just walk out in the field right there and see if you can find me some rabbit droppings. And I said, rabbit droppings? Sure. So I went out and got him a handful of rabbit poop. And the reason the rabbit poop was really good, because when the rabbit digests the grass, it leaves a long fiber. And I can remember, pouring concrete one time, and it had fiberglass in it, and that's what it reminded me of. But and then he mixed it all together, and then he dabbed it on the end of the fashioned point. He put it on the inside of the river cane, and that was kind of an ancient super glue. So, but if no points were available, the cane wood was split at the larger end and sharpened to long points, and the end of it was wrapped with sinew to keep it from splitting more. And the turkeys would wade into small creeks or streams and look for fish to gig. But a lot of times we didn't have a light source a long time ago. So when we gigged at night, whether it was in the winter or summertime, we would stand on the bank, and a lot of gigging was done during the full moon time. And our ancient giggers would stand on the bank where the light shined into a section of water, and they would stand there motionless, very similar to as you saw a crane or a stork at the edge of the water. And he would stand there, sometimes standing on one leg, and all of a sudden his head would dive into the water, and he would spear a small fish or whatever crustacean that went by. That's kind of how our ancient giggers would do a long time ago. They'd wait patiently where the fish would swim by, and then they would gig him. Or they would build a large fire built by the edge of the water, and that would light the water, and then they would stand there, and as a fish came by, then they would gig it then, so a fish could be seen that way. Now, a pre-contact fish gig looks similar to this one here, and you can see my cursor. It's a deer antler point. Some of them, this one is kind of a rough, small. Some of them would be longer, and also there's a tri-split river cane. You can see the sinew wrapped around it to keep it from splitting. And the gigs were before they gigged the fish, they would be put underwater, and then they would be gigged with the end of the gig being in water, and that's how our ancient fishermen would move the river cane around to gig fish in the water itself. Here's some of the tools that I use. There's a hammer. There's the forging tongs, pliers, needle nose, and these two tools right here in the middle are to make the ferrule, and I'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But these are real important, because these are what the two tools that we have that makes the ferrule, and these are cold chisels used for splitting and also making the barbs in our gigs. So this is an anvil that my dad designed, and you see this. These pictures were taken in the wintertime, so we don't hammer as much in the wintertime, but on a warm day, I try to get out there and hammer, and it has a little bit of rust, but during the summertime, that anvil has no rust on it at all. It looks pretty pristine. And here is the centrifugal bellows, where you turn the crank and that forces air through the forge itself. So this is a manual. No electricity is involved in what I do, so very cost worthy, if you want to call it that. And this little forge itself, this is made from the end of a capping pipe off an old oil well. A gentleman called Dad one time and said, Hastings, we were getting ready to cut the ends off some pipe that we sealed to test the pipe itself. He said, do you want a couple of these? Dad said, yeah. So we brought it home, and he cut a hole in it. And I was curious as to what he was doing, but he was making, this is a homemade forge. And this is the one that I have and use today. We'll go through this. These are two pieces of metal. This metal here is from a buggy springs itself, or a Carly spring. But both Dad Hastings and Totem would tell you the best metal to use will be from old model old model A-frame cars, or the old Model T, the A-frame or the springs. Those are the ones that make really good gigs because those have a slight temper in it, but they're from cold rolled steel. Now in the next video, I'm going to show you this little piece of metal right here. Is what I'm going to go through a few steps and how to make a crawdad gig. And you can tell it's about 2 3/4 inches or 2.5 inches long. So, and here it's being heated, and it's got it on the anvil, and we heat it to temperature and we draw it out to proper shape. So this is the starting process of it. In the next step, I'll show you it's been drawn out, which was 2.5, and now it's almost 3 3/4 inches, if you know exact measurement. So when that's kind of drawing the metal out, and also you're annealing it in the process, you're making it soft, you're getting it malleable, and it doesn't have a temper yet, because over time, once this metal is worked with, then it develops its own temper. You heat it and hammer it so much that it kind of tempers itself. We take one end and we flatten it to the spoon shape. This is the part that makes the ferrule. And then this is where those little points come in. And you can see we take that and we roll it over. We use the corner of our anvil. That gig making anvil has a corner shape on it. So we lay the spoon shape in it. We hit it in the middle with our hammer, and it rolls it over. And then we wrap it around those ferrule making spikes, and that's how we get the ferrule shape. And you can see the neck of it. And here is these are getting ready to make the tines, and I'll show you that here in just a second. Here's the same piece where we split it with the cold chisels and getting it ready to make almost a 90-degree. And what we'll do is we'll start heating one side and draw it out. So, and as it's drawn out, we match the tines. So in here, you can see this one is drawn out to shape, or it's the length that I need. And this part right here is what I'm working on right now. It needs to be drawn out a little bit more, and then we'll take it. And then that little hammer that I showed you is a shaping hammer. And once these tines are heated here, then we'll just start hitting the corners or edges, and we'll get into a round, and we start rolling it. And you know, my sons were out there one day, and we counted how many times that I heated, and how many times that, I guess, the heating process, each time we heat the piece, they were counting in that little crawdad gig that this point right here, from start to finish, it's heated 47 times. That was the average that we come up with. So that's a lot of heating, plus that's a lot of hammering. So some days we get out there, and like summertime, like not too long ago, about 3 weeks ago, it was really hot out there, and I had to make 3 gigs for a lady who wanted to give her sons some crawdad gigs, and the temperature, I think, was like 102 outside, but in that shop right next to the fire it's probably about 110, 111 degrees. So it can get pretty warm. This is a picture, and sometimes if you got a buddy in there who's wanting to make a gig, I'm hoping Vince shows up. Then while I make a gig, I'm gonna have him turn the crank. So it is a manual centrifugal forge. So, but anyway, this picture here is the former Miss Cherokee, Whitney Road. She came to me one day. She was getting ready. She said, "Larry, so I'm gonna run for Miss Cherokee." But I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And she said, "Well, I think I'm wanting to talk about gig making and traditional stories." And she said, "But I need to learn how to make a gig, so when I tell my story, I'll know what all is involved." So here she is. She's out here making her gig, and then this is her. And I've got a picture, and you can see how hot the metal is. And then here's her finished product, and it looks pretty good. I was really proud of her. And I have this titled "Finished Crawdad Gig Made by Former Miss Cherokee, Whitney Roach." I have offered it to Mika Roy, and as soon as she can come around, because I believe her great uncle, if not her grandpa, I believe, is totem hair. So
Yeah, it is her grandpa.
it is her grandpa. So
Yeah.
thank you for collaborating, because I really wasn't sure, but I didn't want to be wrong, because I might have been right. But yeah, so her grandpa is totem hair, and I would love for her to come and teach her something that her grandpa showed my dad, that my dad showed me, and we might be able to complete that circle. So, but yeah, this is the gig that Whitney made, and hopefully if I can show Mika then Mika can have a finished product that has something in, in that from her family, her family history. But here's people ask me, how long does it take you to make a gig? Well, when I started out, it took me about 2 hours to make a crawdad gig. But now, being beyond my 5-year training time, I think I can make a crawdad gig in about 35 minutes. I can make a fish gig in about 45 minutes to an hour. And that's having a good hot anvil, having good metal, and a good fire to work with. And, some days I can go out there and I don't really feel up to, I need to make a gig. But it is something that whenever you go out there, and you really have to want to do it. And some days I don't just feel right. And if you go out there and you start making yourself do it, you won't have a very good product, or it's probably not going to work out in your best favor. So I'll show you here in just a second when we go back to the live feed. I have this is a wood rasp. And this section over here is the other end of this wood rasp. And in this picture to the right is the finished product of that wood rasp. So you can see the scaling on that. And I had that gig. I've had several people come by wanting to buy that gig, but it's just, my dad made one a long time ago that, I looked at it and it looked like a snake skin. It looked like it had scales on it. I thought it was really, really neat. And I thought, well, Dad, I said, can I have that gig? And he said, we'll see. Now that was a couple of his favorite words were maybe, or we'll see. And I knew what we'll see meant, because growing up, Dad worked construction, and Mom, we worked at the school. We may not have had a whole lot of money, but we were blessed and treasures way beyond that, of having each other and the love we had in our family. And we never went a day without a meal. We always had something to eat, whether it was something we bought from the store or whether we something that nature provided us, in our history and our culture taught us that how nature can take care of you. But we never abused that. We never took more than what we needed, because we knew somewhere down the line, even in, I've eaten quail and deer and squirrel, rabbit, turkey, a lot of fish in my lifetime. But it's just something that we always knew we had another refrigerator, and that was down at the creek or down in the woods. And that I've eaten lots and lots of rabbit and lots of squirrel. Let me tell you the story one time about eating rabbits. Dad made a wonderful barbecued baked rabbit. You talk about delicacy now. Growing up, we couldn't wait for the wintertime. So early one fall, and he always told us, he said, don't go killing rabbits until after the first, third, or fourth hard frost. And this is right about November. And one day we had a real hard frost. That was before any other frost. So me and my brother, we thought we'd go out there and kill some rabbits. We did. We always had beagles. So we went out and we killed about 2 or 3 rabbits and brought them back and we put them on the porch. And it was cold, really cold. So Dad heard us shooting down in the woods. And he knew we had some rabbits. So when we walked in the house to get warm, he asked us, he said, how many rabbits you got? And I said, well, we got 4. He said, if you don't clean them, it's great cold out there, you need to clean them now. He said, because when they get cold, they're hard to clean. So me and my brother, we went back out there, and on the porch, those rabbits were laying on the porch. And I looked out there beside one of the rabbits, and there was a big grub worm, 2 big grub worms laying out there beside that rabbit. And I thought, that's odd. How'd those grub worms crawl up on our back porch? So we went and we hollered at Dad to come out and look, and he kind of laughed. He said, you remember I told you all not to kill rabbits at least until after the 3rd or 4th frost? We said, yeah. He said, those rabbits are eating grass, and that grass has parasites on it, small parasites. And when that rabbit eats the grass that has parasites on it, those parasites get into their throat or the crawler, and they bury between the skin and in the inside throat. And that's where they survive and they grow. So he said, he picked up a rabbit up. He said, here's one right here. And he felt of its neck, and I got a hold of it. He said, here, feel it. And that neck of that rabbit started to move. Oh God, we eat these things. So we didn't eat too many rabbits after that, because that was just learning, something that I learned, that, he told us the reason why. And then a lot of times there is a reason why they tell you things, but a lot of times they don't tell you why. And your best experience is when you experience it yourself. You teach yourself a lot of things. And have I failed? Yes, I failed. And this is just two of, I got out there the other day, and I think the last 5 years I've been throwing all my broken gigs to a bucket. And the other day I pulled all those gigs out there, whether they're crawdad gigs or fish gigs or three-prong gigs. There's 27 gigs in that bucket that have either burnt the ends off, broke the barbs off, they cracked, they split. And yeah, even though you do this for a long time, you still make mistakes. And those mistakes keep you honest. And these two right here, the lady wanted 7 gigs, and I had made 5 already. So when I got one of them, and it wasn't quite straight enough. So I took it back and I heated and I tapped it and I let it cool and I tapped it again. When I tapped again, it broke. So I grabbed another one that I made and it broke. So I threw all those away, and I got another piece of metal that had a better component out of it. So I want to put out a product that I'm proud of, that people can use, and they'll get years of experience out of it. And these are the different types of gigs that I make. Here's the 3-prong gig that I made. Here's that one that I was telling you about that was in that picture that has from the wood rasp. Here's some single prong. When I was growing up, my dad, he gave us a gig, but it was a single prong river cane gig. And he told us, he said, boys, I want y'all to learn I want you to learn to gig with this, because if you can learn to gig with a single prong, by no means, you should be able to hit something with a 2-prong. But he said, I'm gonna tell you, this little single prong gig, he said, it's fast. And he said, a lot of fish won't get away from you. And here's 2 other fish gigs, and here's a crawdad gig, and I just threw this little piece in there. This gig, basically, when I get to this point right here, and I'm making a gig, this is my halfway point. So I know I'm halfway done. But here's a picture of my dad working the old forge, and you can see the shop is pretty. In the video I'll show you here in a minute, we've collected a lot of things. But as we moved into this house where we grew up in 1966, in 1968, Dad built this little lean-to here. And his first forge, there's the same centrifugal blower that we have today, and there's that anvil that I use today. And this little component right here between the fire and my father standing there, that's where we make the tines. We roll the tines over and we get the shape of the gig itself. But I do want you to look at the forge itself. You guys that can see this, you're looking at it, and I want you to look and see if you can identify. I'll give you a few seconds to look at it and see if you can identify it. If you had time to look at it, it's square, it's metal, and there's a little handle there. Well, that little thing right there, my dad we didn't have a whole lot of money to go out and buy these things that were already made in process. This is a box fan, an old metal box fan. He put concrete on the inside of it, and he made a bowl there, and then left a hole in it. And then he has PVC pipe from here, and he has a little angle pipe from an old fence that was had a bend in it, or pipe fence had a bend in it. And that's that forge is from an old box fan. So and that was him. He made a lot of things, and his engineering ideas was pretty. I was always amazed. And here's some of the gigs that we've made. There's some. I have these gigs. He said, "Bud," he said, "keep these." He said, "That way, when people come, you show them what we made." I have these 4 gigs this very day, and I will never part with them. So I will probably part myself from them, later on, but they will still be here for my kids to do the same thing with. But here he is. Here's the picture of him gigging on 14 Mile Creek, and this is using a small 2-prong gig. And what we're after a fish that we call a sucker. And this is a red horse. It's a common name we call the hog sucker. And it's kind of a delicacy. You fillet it, you scale it first, and then you fillet it. You leave the skin on one side, and then on the fleshy side, you score it, make little checkers on it, and you deep fry it in hot oil. And that it's a bony fish, a very bony fish. And as it's cooked, that the bones crystallize, so that makes them, you can eat them. They won't stick inside your ribs. That's what Dad used to tell us. Because anyway, this is a picture of my son, and I know that I had to blow these pictures up. They're a little bit distorted, but here we're cleaning crawdads, and here we've got our lights. And this little lantern that we have, I have a small lantern, and it's pretty neat. But we've always used a gasoline lantern. And one night we were out gigging, and you gig at night. It's cool at night, and there's other critters that come out at night. And one of the things, and I'll tell you the story if I can tell you, we were together. Dad, I had the light in the middle. Dad had the bucket, and I'm getting ready to gig a pretty good sized crawdad. And I'm leaning over and get ready to gig it, and all of a sudden I hear him say, "Bud, don't move." And I'm thinking, God, I said, "It's a big crawdad," and I didn't hear anything. And I kept thinking, well, I don't know how big. That's got to be a big crawdad if it's bigger than the one I'm going to get ready to gig. And all I heard next was he said, "Be still, don't move." I've got the light in my left hand, gig in my right hand. I'm kind of leaning forward, and all of a sudden something catches to the left of me, between me and him. He's to my left, Dad's to my left. And I look underneath my arm. We're in probably water that's about not waist, but to our thighs. And I'm holding the light up, and something caught in the corner of my eye, and I looked down there, and all I heard Dad say was, "You seen?" And I said, "Yeah." And it was a big old cottonmouth. I bet he was 5.5 feet long. Big as if you could blow an inner tube up on a bicycle tire. That's how big his body was. And when he said, "Don't move," the first thing I thought is, I am not going to move. But he's probably 2 feet away from me. I've got my hand, the lantern up like this in my hand, and he comes right underneath the light, and that's where he stops. So, and then Dad takes his gig, and he lays his gig over his body in the middle of it, and he pulls in a sweeping motion, and that snake just curls around his gig, and he's walking into the bank, and he pulls him close to the bank and points him in the direction. And I'm sitting there thinking, how's he gonna kill that thing? And I thought, and first thing Dad said is, he said, I'm not gonna kill him. He said, and what he told me, he said, "Bud," he said, "we're in his territory." He said, he's cold. He came to the light, but he said, this is his area. And he said, a lot of people don't believe this, but he said, they're territorial. They guard the territory. So he got him pointed in the right direction. He tapped him, and the snake took off. So that was, and that's just one of many experiences with snakes at night that we've had. But nowadays, if you can see where I'm standing, we have headlamps, and we have pretty good headlamps. And so we each have our own bucket, and we each have our own gig. So it's just one of the stories that I have, but there's many, many stories. A lot of, when I went out with my parents and the friends that came with us, those are stories those are times that, I didn't think about it then, but now, all those times that we went out together, I knew back in my mind, one of these days we're never going to be able to do that. And, that time has come, like I would tell Dustin. So anytime he ever asked me to go, I went. So here's a bucket of blue crawdads. This is a half-a-gallon bucket of good blue crawdads that we gigged one night. Me and my son Dustin and Katie, my daughter Katie, she likes to go. Here's Kevin Stretch called these lobsters, and I would agree. These are crawdads that are on 14 Mile Creek. I won't tell you where, because it's a kind of a given secret. Nobody wants to give away their source because of fear of all the Indians that live in the area. But no, we only get what we need. But these are pretty good sized crawdads. These are what we call blue crawdads. And here's some clean ones. So I've got my hand out there, and these are, this is a one night. It's just a small. I just took a sample shot of what we got, and then frying crawdads. Or here's our little fryer that we have. I cook crawdads outside because, you know, mom always said, you know, she didn't cook crawdads. You know, we did a few times. So if we thought we freeze them through the winter, and sometimes we have a special occasion where somebody comes in and they'll say, hey, do y'all have any crawdads? Or mom said, so-and-so's coming in, or Mert's coming in, or somebody. And Larry, you got any crawdads? I'll say, yeah. So, you know, in wintertime, we cook them inside, but a lot of times we cook outside. And you can see my kids are always fascinated because when we cook them, they turn red. And that is just, it's just kind of the chemical makeup in the exoskeleton of the crawdad. Here's a modern gigging boat. They have a long time ago, they used a basket, a wire basket, what they call a potato basket, and they would put pine cones in it, and they put pitch on. They would pour pitch over them. They would light them. That was their light source. But now, and then they had the generator. They would hook lights up to a generator, and the generator, while it was running, made noise. But now they just use car batteries, and then these lights are these are called bar lights or LED lights, and they use very little electricity, but they give off a lot of light, and they're very quiet. They make no noise at all. And you can see the gig that he has here is it's not like a gig that I make. My gig is all that I make is all hand forged. This is done with a cutting torch, and they heat the ferrule, and then they weld the ferrule together, and then they shape the barbs. And their barbs are turned on the inside. Our barbs on the gigs that we make, they offset. Okay. And let me share this video with you that I made one day when I was sitting out in the shop.
Okay, so basically what you got to see is you got to see a small part of what I do. I work with metal and different types of metal. A lot of it comes from old car springs, but what I really like to work with is old buggy springs, old buckboard springs that you guys see. And, you see you're watching a Western, and they're riding away in a horse-drawn carriage where there's underneath the seat, there's springs, and basically they're compressed together, kind of like this, so that they spring back and forth. Now that has a little bit of tension in it, a little bit of temper to it, but that's what we call cold roll steel. And those basically those have been forged by a farrier. So but over time, they become flexible, and they have a little spring, a little tension to them. But then that's basically the metal that I look for. I mean, I have used old lawnmower blades, but they have to be from kind of the very first lawnmower blades, because they were thick and they were wide. So there's quite a bit of metal involved. But anyway, this is kind of what I do. Some days when I'm not doing anything, I'll come out here, I'll hammer it, and it's kind of a soothing for me. It's a hobby for me. And I know there's a lot of hobbies out there, but this one, I get to make a product that some people that want, and they get to take it out and skill. Is it an art? Yes, it's an art. Is it a craft? It's a craft, but I call it a practical. I call it a practical art or practical craft, because it's something that I make that people want, and they can go out and use it. Now, I do have some people that come by and they collect gigs. I'll have somebody say, "Oh, Larry, I just want one that I can hang up on the wall." But that one that I make them a gig that they can hang up on the wall. And that gig, if they ever decide to, they can take it from the wall, they go down the creek, and they can throw it around and gig a few fish, maybe get a few rocks. And the product that I try to make, and I try to back it up, it should hold up. I have a gig that my dad made me when I was 14 years old. Guys, I was in my late 50s, and I use it just about every summer when I take my kids down there. It's a gig that I used when he was alive. Down, we get a lot of fish, fish fried. So, but those are the times that I miss. Those are the times that are going by the wayside. Nobody does this thing. So I hope that I'm making a product that where we can not just carry on a tradition or a culture, but it carries on a way of life for families. If it's a father and a son, or a father and a daughter, or a mother and a son can go out, they can gig a few fish, or use a crawdad gig, go get some crawdads, and they enjoy their time together, because those times they won't last forever. You know, I always, you know, when my dad was alive, I always cherished, you know, going with him, because that's what he loved to do. I was always, when he said, "Let's go," I said, "I'm walking out the door. If you're not behind me, you're walking backwards." That's what I tell him. He'd laugh. So we could. Now, very many times did I tell him I couldn't or no, because I knew one of these days it was going to be the time when he wasn't around. That time's now. It's happened. So, and I miss it. But I hope you guys enjoyed my little demonstration and my little talk. So, but guys, there's a lot of culture. There's a lot of culture that we don't have anymore. There are a lot of people out there that, you know, a lot of the elders that we have today that know a lot of things, and we just need to ask those questions. You know, we need to get comfortable. They need to get comfortable of being around us, and then they can trust us. And that's kind of what I learned to do growing up with my parents, and we would go visit. In this little area that I live in, there, I think I live in, I'd say probably a 15-mile radius. And at one time, we counted the elders that lived in this area, and there were 67 elders. And people that, you know, that knew the language, spoke the language, that could teach you the culture if it's something that they needed to do. But guys, just this past 2 years ago, we stopped. We started counting. And I think we only have 7 left out of that. You know, my mom was one of them. There's a couple others that lived across the creek, a couple that lived down the road. But even when we did that, when we did the elder count, only a few of them considered in that group. But they're being less and less. And the language that we have today is not the language that was spoken. You know, my dad used to tell us a story. He'd tell us, he said, "Boys, language has changed 3 times over the years." And he said it's about to change again. Because a long time ago, I was told stories that the language that we know today was not the language that was spoken in our ancient times. Because back in the animals, the trees, the wind, the rain, and all that was there could communicate, and they spoke one language and they understood each other. And you sit back and you think, how is that? Because it's something that is, we have a disbelief because we have a disconnect. We have a disconnect of our ancient times and our past, our culture past, and what we have today. Because those weren't spoke of as we were growing up. So, you know, I know a lot of culture. I don't know all of it. I would love to know a whole lot more. And it's you guys that I hope that you listen. I hope that you learn. Because somewhere down the line, you know, I was young and naive growing up. You know, I had a life and I had a lifestyle. I grew up in the weekends. We played a lot of softball. You know, for years we played a lot of softball. It wasn't until, and that was starting my, you know, when I was 19 years old up until, you know, my early 30s when I started to realize, you know, when I started, you know, we would go with Dad a lot of times, but we weren't really involved. And that's kind of when I became involved in what he was doing. I was fascinated by what he was doing. I was fascinated by what he knew. And I was really fascinated by how much he wanted to share it. And he taught us a lot, my brothers and I teach my kids. You know, there are a lot of ceremonies that we do to this very day. You know, one of them is what we call it going to water. And I do it. I take my kids down, you know, sometimes in the summertime, sometimes in the middle of winter. You know, some things in our lives just aren't going right. We still do that. And it's quite something to walk out in the middle of a creek in the middle of winter. But if you're doing something that is part of a tradition, part of a culture, it doesn't really bother me. And, you know, a long time ago, it would have been something to see because our people got ready before daylight, before the sun even come up, before, I told my grandpa one time, he said, did you go down there and did you, and they had a well where they got their water from. And I don't know what it was called. It was this long tube. It had a little holder on it. You would click it and you would raise it down in the well and then pull it up, crank it up.
We call it a horn.
And you would lift it over and then pour water into your bucket. And he asked me, because you tie it up. I just wrapped it up. He said, and he called me Ganoleg. Ganoleg. He said at Cherokee, did you tie that rope up? And I said, Clump. He said, well, I said, Grandpa's dark. He said, I know. And sometimes he called me Wella. He said, I know Wella. He said, but I'll tell you what I was told. He said, sometimes, he said, that the difference between night and day is just the color of the air. That's what he'd say. And I thought, what does he mean? If you stop and listen, the difference between night and day is that the sunlight basically colors the air, lightens the air. And when basically nighttime is dark, just void of light, some people would say it's just the color of the air. As I got older and after he was gone, I laughed about that. I told my kids that once and they just looked at me and said, what? Air is not colored? I said, yes, it is, if you think about it. But guys, this is what I do. My name is Larry Shade, and I hope that you got something out of this. And a lot of times when I tell people, you're not going to get anything out of it except for yourself. Because once you understand who you are, once you understand your purpose in life, being Cherokee is one thing, but understanding being Cherokee is a whole new side of it. A lot of us know we're Cherokee, but a lot of us don't understand that. And I ask that question to my students in the summertime. What does it mean to be Cherokee? What is Cherokee? Some of them, they don't have answers. But being with them, I try to teach them what I know so that next time that question comes up, that they have an answer. And they have a reply. But none of those answers are the same. It's what it means to you and how you perceive it, and how you can relay that back to someone else. Because eventually in your lifetime, you guys are going to grow up and have families. You're going to have kids. You're going to ask, what does it mean to be Indian? What does it mean to be Cherokee? And I hope you're able to tell your kids. I hope that what I'm telling you transfers just from me to you to them, and it goes on. Because the identity of the Native American is becoming less and less and less. And if we lose our culture, we lose our identity, we lose our language, we lose who we are. We're just the people that walk around in name. One gentleman said, what is Cherokee? And I'll leave you with this. Cherokee, he said, Larry, Cherokee's just a Cherokee. He said, if you really want to study it, you ought to. Our true name is Ani. We are the real people. We are the principal people. That's kind of why our chief is called the principal chief. It's based upon our truth. Ani, we are the truth. We are the people of the truth.
Guys, that's all I have. I know I didn't have a whole lot of time for question. I think there's a minute left, right, Vince?
Yes, sir, there is.
Do we have a little extra time?
Unfortunately, no, we have to do a hard stop.
Okay, and that's fine. But can you post my email address and they can email me and ask me the questions and I can respond to them that way? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that's a possibility. We can definitely get your information out to the people that want it. That's not a problem. We sure can.
Well, let me close real fast and then we can get on to the next presenter. Guys, I appreciate your time and allow me to come in and do this to the staff and you guys that are out there listening. I hope that my little speech, and because it's not just about making gigs, it's about culture, who we are, but more so it's about who we represent. We represent our elders that have come before us and gone on. I myself am just a bridge to that path to them. And they presented me something, and that something that I have it's not unique to me. It was a way of life. The myths and legends that we talk about, that was a way of life for them. They got to see the things, the components, they got to see the things, the events that happened. You know, forever I will hold that true to my heart, because those guys got to experience something that I teach and talk about. I thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. I say, well done.